Okay. So first of all, before I continue, I wanted to make sure that I shouted out, this is my son's first in-person Democratic Club meeting. In the back of the room. Yeah, Avery, yeah. So welcome, Avery, our newest Santa Monica Democrat. And wanted to start by asking you, Congresswoman, there's 3 Democratic members of Congress who are running for the Senate. And what do you believe that your service as senator would provide to the people of California that's different from what we would get if one of your other colleagues was elected?
Yep. So we're very fortunate. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge how fortunate we are to have 3 talented people in this race. I want to acknowledge how much I appreciate being able to be on the campaign trail and be in conversation with Adam and Barbara. I think we're all very committed. I know I am, to running a positive race that helps energize and turn people out across the state of California. This race is the top of the ticket this cycle for Californians. So without this race, without a spirited contest here, we just wouldn't have the ability to mobilize and activate all of the voters across California. What do I think makes me different? I don't do Congress the way other people do. I mentioned that I fundraise differently than the other candidates in this race. I mentioned that I use oversight as a tool. I think those things are really important. I'm also the candidate who's from a swing district. I know how to message in a way that wins every last possible vote. I flipped my seat in 2018. It was held by a Republican who had won by 17 points. I hung on to that seat in 2020, even as the other 2 flip seats in Orange County were lost to Republicans. And I hung on after a redistricting cycle that gave me 70% new voters in a midterm election cycle. And that messaging that I do is really, really strong messaging on the economy. Democrats are the party of a strong, stable, globally competitive economy that gives families the opportunity to take care of their kids and have a secure retirement. We need to message on that all of the time, because it is always true. And so I think that one of the things that's different about me is I come from that background in consumer protection. I talk a lot about economic issues, breaking down, for example, how about half of the inflation that we have seen in recent years comes from increased corporate profits. Half. Right. And so that is a very, very important message when we're out there in an election cycle trying to win on inflation. And so I think one of the things I offer is I know how to win those tough races. I know what it takes. And I think what California needs, and I like how you framed your question, what can you offer California? I am offering California a political leader, not just a policy one. On the policies, do I think Adam and Barbara and I will take the same vote to protect abortion? I do. Do I think Barbara and Adam and I will take the same votes to prevent gun violence? I do. I have a political experience, which is what it is like to knock doors in Huntington Beach day after day after day and be able to win in places like that. And I look at what we need to do to build a durable Democratic majority. And I think we need someone who's a strong messenger on the economy, someone who's new to Washington, who brings that fresh energy and knows how to run those tough races and is going to help us do that work in every part and pocket of the state. I know what it's like to be a candidate and look up ticket and need help. I've been that person, and I'm going to be that person in all of the races here. There's no way to win back the House without winning 3 to 5 seats in California and hanging on to them. I know how to do that, and I want to help be part of that. And I have a skill set that's about messaging in a way that lets us deliver and create that Democratic majority and win in the county boards of supervisors and the school district and everywhere that we need to win in California. And that is to the benefit of every Californian to have that durable Democratic majority in the House.
Coming up to the podium. I'm Melissa Goodman. I'm the VP of Programs here. You mentioned abortion access, so I have an abortion access question for you. What specifically will you do to expand abortion access and also to ensure that Congress doesn't enact a nationwide abortion ban?
Yep. So I think we have to frame this issue as one about freedom. That's fundamentally what abortion is about. It's about allowing every person to make their own decision. It is true that a majority of Californians and a majority of Americans believe that abortion should be up to individual people. But we can't ignore the fact that there are people who have different views. And they may not dominate Santa Monica, they may not dominate California, but they are out there. So what I always say is I will always fight for your ability to make your own decision, guided by science, guided by healthcare, guided by your values. And that means you may have a different opinion about what you would do than I would do or someone else would do, but this is fundamentally about a freedom issue. And we have to see this as part and parcel of an attack on health and science. I don't think it's a coincidence that we saw the attacks on COVID, on vaccines, at the same time that we're seeing attacks on things like abortion and trans healthcare. They are all connected to a larger project of undermining experts and undermining healthcare providers. connected to undermining the social rights of those who depend on them. So I think it's really important that we talk about this issue in a way that makes clear that every American should stand up for the freedom of people to make their own decisions on this. And I think that is the biggest reach that brings the most people in. The other thing is I think our messaging here matters. I think we need to talk about the decision to have an abortion, not about choice. Choice is, do you want the vanilla or chocolate? Choice is, which sorbet would you like? Decision implies correctly that this is an important thing that people have to decide whether they want to start a family, when and if they want to become a parent. And so I think talking about respect for the abortion decision, respect for the decision about when and if to become a parent, gives us as Democrats the kind of respect and gravity for this decision that we need. Look, there's no way to guard against a nationwide abortion ban without abolishing the filibuster. I think that has to be front and center. Part of the reason I'm running for the Senate is that is an institution that must be shaken up. There's this idea that the Senate is kind of the last bastion of protecting rights of democracy. And what it has been in my 5 years in Congress is the place where policy goes to die. It is a place where cowards go to hide from having to take the tough votes. And so I think part of what we need to do to protect against protect the right of everyone to make their own decision about healthcare is to abolish the filibuster. So instead of playing defense and guarding against a nationwide abortion ban, we can play offense and pass legislation, as the House has already done, and it went to die in the Senate, to actually protect everyone's right as a legislative matter, if not a constitutional one.
Hi,
Hi.
Congresswoman.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you. I'm Sam. I'm the vice chair of the Political Action Committee. And I was wondering, what will you do and what have you done to ensure that there is gun control and more gun control, especially as a student and as children have #1 cause of death for children, gun violence? What will you do? And would you consider repealing the Second Amendment?
Yes, so great question. I think that one of the things to do is to talk about gun violence prevention and to think about it and understand it with its component parts. We tend to focus, understandably, disproportionately, on the horrors of mass shootings, on the risk of weapons of mass destruction, of assault rifles, shootings in schools and churches and other places on civic duty. I think for that, a ban on assault weapons is a huge help. I think a ban on high capacity magazines, some of the things that we've done that will make a big, big difference, as well as more education about red flag laws that allow people to contact someone and have weapons taken out of their possession during that time. But the truth is we lose many multiples of Americans to other kinds of gun deaths, including accidents, intimate family partner violence, gun deaths by suicide than we do to the problem of mass shooting. And I think we need to pay equal political attention to those. And so I'm a big supporter of treating this as a public health problem, of asking the question of patients at every doctor's visit, just like they ask you, do you wear your seatbelt? Do you smoke? Do you own a weapon? That is an important question that we ought to be engaging the medical profession in trying to solve. We've already seen real success with this approach of asking the question with regard to reducing veteran suicide. And I think it creates a path for us to go forward. With regard to the Second Amendment, I suspect it's here to stay. I have to say, I don't see a path we haven't been able to get the ERA passed, and that's like, I think we're a long ways from that. But I do think it is important that we address the fact that we have a court that is corrupt, that is reading some things into the Second Amendment that simply are not and have never been there. And so to me, the way I would think about it is addressing the corrupt court, being willing to expand the court, being willing to consider term limits, passing an enforceable code of judicial ethics, making sure that we're confirming judges at a pace and rate and the type of person who's going to stand up for individual rights. And I think that is our best path to restore the Second Amendment appropriately to the limited scope that I believe it was actually intended to have, not the expansive scope and reading that we see today. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Nice to
Porter,
meet you.
Keith Coleman, pleasure to meet you, treasurer of the club. The impacts of climate change are becoming more and more evident in our everyday lives. And the warnings by the scientific community regarding what the future holds without action is truly terrifying. What have you done in the past to address climate change? And what would you do as a US Senator? And moreover, how will California deal with managed retreat in an effective way to ensure the safety of residents, communities and property.
Yep. California has led the way on addressing climate change and moving toward the transition to green energy. And we need a senator who acts like that, who recognizes that we are leading the way and leans the federal government into being with our policies. I voted no on this debt ceiling deal. I'll just put that out there on the table right at the start. And I'll tell you why I voted no. I voted no because of the climate provisions. I voted no because big oil has way too much sway in Washington already. And this debt deal is a giveaway to big oil. I have never taken money from fossil fuels. I serve on the House Natural Resources Committee. So I have stood up to polluters over and over and over again. I'm pushing for higher bonding requirements so polluters clean up their messes and we don't have environmental justice issues with brown and black communities, low-income communities being left with pollution. I passed the law to raise the royalty and rental rates to put green energy on a cleaner level playing field. The truth is we have to start understanding this is not just a climate issue. It is also fundamentally an economic and social issue. And we need to help engage people, whether they think of themselves as environmentalists or not, as understanding that they all need to be engaged in climate change. So one of the things I say to my constituents is the costs of addressing climate change are real and they are significant. You know what is even more expensive? Not addressing climate change. And every day that we delay, every day that we take a step backwards, and that debt deal was several steps backwards, it gets harder and harder and harder to bring about the climate change that we need to see. We're in a position now where we have to talk more about climate stabilization than we do about actually reversing climate change. That's the situation we find ourselves in. I'll give you an example in my area. The train track between Orange County and San Diego is the second highest passenger ridership in the nation outside of the Northeast corridor. And that train track is literally falling into the ocean because of erosion. And so it's not coming someday, it is here and it is real. So it's working on a lot of environmental justice issues, things like shade canopy to address extreme heat, wildfires, making sure we're investing in our federal wildland firefighting force. I chair a committee, a task force on the intersection of national security and climate change. That is an incredibly important tool. I think all of our foreign aid that we're giving out ought to have an angle on it around climate and around food sustainability, around water, around a transition to green energy. So I just think it's the lens through which we have to view most of the challenges of the next 50 to 100 years. We've already waited way too long.
Thank you. So the next question is regard to the Supreme Court. We know that the Republicans were refusing to seat Merrick Garland for a year, and then they rammed through Amy Coney Barrett like in a matter of weeks. And now we have this current 6-3 court that is taking us back and destroying women's rights and voting rights and making it so difficult to address so many of our current problems. What have you done to date about the appointment manipulation and the radicalization of the Supreme Court? And what would you do as a senator?
Yep. So we have to talk about this court in a way that engages every American in this fight. And the way to explain this to people is the problem with the court is not that it's conservative, although I personally wish it were not. It's that it's corrupt. Because that is a lens that lets every single American understand what is at stake for them. This is a court that is controlled by dark money. The cases that they choose, the decisions that they render, the people who take the bench are all being funneled, controlled by dark money that's being funneled into our court. And the result is the decisions that we're getting. This is not an accident. This is not a coincidence. It's not about any one particular person. As much as I wish I could tell you, it's all about Judge Barrett or it's all about Judge Alito. It's not. This is a long-term strategy to control the court and to corrupt it for the purposes of dark money and special interest money. So I think we have to put that lens on it and connect it to the kinds of work that we're doing with regard to standing up to special interests in Washington. I think Sheldon Whitehouse has this exactly right as he talks about it, that what we're seeing is an effort by the court to advance justices and put in place cases that actually attack democracy itself, which then has the ability to police the court. So who polices the Supreme Court? Supposed to be Congress. But as they're passing laws that eviscerate the Voters' Rights Act, as they're taking up things like this state legislature doctrine, as they're refusing to address issues of gerrymandering, the court is weakening the very democratic institution of Congress, which is supposed to be being a check on it and policing it. So I strongly support expanding the court. I think it is absolutely appropriate. We do not have enough justice in this country. Important cases on consumer protection, environmental protection, immigration never get taken because the court's docket is full of pro-corporate and pro-extremist cases. And so I think it's appropriate to expand the court. I think long-term limits, possibly with the opportunity to be confirmed again to another term, is the way to go. And I think we have to help the public understand that the duty to police the court rests with Congress. They read in 4th grade that there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. They think that's inviolable. It's not. It's a decision of Congress how to structure that court. And so I think we have to help move the American public to understand that our court is attacking democracy, and then our democratic body of Congress, the House and the Senate, are the institution that is to respond back and protect the people and deliver a court that actually delivers for individual Americans. So I think we have a lot of work to do. We did this successfully, by the way, with the filibuster. 4 or 5 years ago, if you talked about the filibuster, people said, you can't attack that. That's like in the Constitution. And we now know that it's not, but the filibuster is just a bad rule of procedure. It's the same thing with the court. The 9 justices, the system that we have for appointing them is not something that is inviolate. It's not something embedded in the Constitution. It's up to our democracy to restore confidence in the court and to address the corruption in it. And if we as the elected people don't do it, then we are in serious trouble. And so I think we need more courage, frankly, from our senators, more leadership and more creativity, and less deference to the institutional patterns that we've had, because frankly, they're not working us and they've been corrupted.
Hi, I'm Mike Soloff. I'm the Vice President for Membership, and I'm going to be up here a little while because I'm going to be asking you about various aspects of the housing crisis and
This
homelessness.
is my favorite issue. So
Okay, well,
Lucky
mine
me.
too.
lucky me, I get 3 questions on it.
Okay,
4 questions.
so here's the first thing. So according to HUD, even prior to the pandemic, we had 9.6 million renter households in the United States that are both low income and paying more than 50% for rent. And we have another 12 million households that are low income and paying somewhere between more than 30 and up to 50%. And 2.6 million of those households are here in California. So studies have shown that the Section 8 program is very effective in addressing that, keeping people from being homeless and helping their kids. But Congress and the president are only funding such that 1 out of every 4 households who qualify actually get any help. So what have you done in the past to address this aspect of the housing affordability crisis, and what would you do as a senator?
Yep. So housing is the #1 issue you're going to hear me talk about in this Senate campaign, because I think it is the #1 crisis that we're facing going forward. It's not just in California. What's happened in California with affordability, by the way, is increasingly happening everywhere in the country. So places that used to be affordable are increasingly seeing challenges with this. The metrics he gave about paying less than 50%. That 50% mark used to be the benchmark for extremely unaffordable, right? And we now have people paying 60, 70, 80% of their income for housing, which leads to other problems like not being able to pay for medical care, not being able to pay for food. You're absolutely right. Section 8 works, and the solution here is to fully fund it. So we fully fund Medi-Cal for every person who qualifies who needs healthcare. We should fully fund Section 8 for every person who qualifies who needs housing, period, full stop. It is much cheaper to do that than it is to allow people to go unhoused and be insecurely housed and to wind up with facing and dealing with chronic street homelessness and the instability in our neighborhoods. I also think we need to invest in the low-income housing tax credit and change how we do that program to make more housing available under it. This is the bonds that we fund through the federal government to back building of low-income housing. It's also a very successful program. To me, the biggest issues with housing, big picture, are that we have federal leaders who keep kicking the can downstream on housing. Yes, we need the states to be engaged. Yes, we need counties to be engaged. Yes, we need cities to be engaged. But I hear federal leaders get asked this question and they say, that's a local issue. Baloney. What it means to run for high office is to own the hardest issues and challenges facing our state. And at this point, that is housing. The second thing I'll hear is people say all the time that housing is not really the federal, like, even if they wanted to do something about it, the federal government just doesn't really have a role in housing. Nonsense. The 30-year mortgage would never exist, never have come into existence, and certainly not be in existence today if the federal government didn't back every 30-year mortgage out there. If you doubt that the federal government has a big role in housing, look at the racial discrimination and patterns of redlining created by the federal government with the mortgage maps that it did in the 40s and 50s and onward. So federal government, the last time we made a really, really big investment in private market housing was the GI Bill. So we have reaped exactly what we've sowed here, which is we failed to invest in housing and allowed it to become an increasing problem, been willing to say over and over again, that's a private market thing, that's a local thing, rather than lean in and have solutions.
Okay, so while rent burden is principally for people at the middle and below, we're also finding, particularly in California, that it's getting very expensive for people above that,
Yeah.
young families, for example, to be able to afford, homes that they can purchase, and the like. So what have you done in the past, and what would you do in the Senate to address that aspect of the housing crisis?
So my background in California public policy started in housing. It started in the wake of the foreclosure crisis when Kamala Harris appointed me to enforce the settlement agreement against the big banks who had cheated California families in many instances into taking on unaffordable loans, and then were cheating them on the back end and foreclosing on them. So I care a lot about homeownership. It is the dominant determinant where you live, whether it's ownership or rental, is the dominant determinative of your well-being. It determines your public safety. It determines your ability to access school. It determines whether you have clean air and clean water, your job opportunities, your commute time. It is just incredibly important. I did an event at UC Davis the other day. There were 70 students in the room. Takes a 4.0 today to get into the University of California, Davis. 70 students there. I asked them how many of them thought they would buy a house in their lifetime in California. Not a single hand went up. Now, whether you think they're being too pessimistic or you think they're looking honestly at the facts, that is a gigantic political problem, because our young families and our future earners, our new workforce that's coming on, do not feel tethered to California. They do not feel that there's the opportunity to build a stable and successful life here. So it is absolutely critical that we make investments. What I would do here is I would start thinking about, one, expanding funding for programs that work, like the FHA loan. I think California's program that it's got to help reduce the down payment and then pay it back from the appreciation is exactly right. That program was oversubscribed the day it started. I think we also have to look at what are the structures that can fill in between the 30-year mortgage with the 10%, 15%, 20% down, which is out of reach today for the vast majority of Californians who do not already own their home. And the 1-year lease with no protection at all. So there are things like long-term leases. We could have senior housing products backed by the federal government that allow people to move into senior housing and create an affordable loan product through their end of life. We could have loan products for young families that allow them to, like long-term rental, 5 or 6 year rentals that let them stay tethered to housing, to an apartment throughout their kids' schooling. And so I think we need to innovate in between these two polar opposites to help close that divide between the homeownership class and the rental class, because it is an incredible problem. But if you talk to businesses and you ask them what is the biggest problem facing them, they will not say taxes. They will tell you truthfully, it's housing. It's the cost of recruiting and retaining employees today. And that is really what is crippling us. My own son, who's 14, asked me if I would visit him if he moved outside California. And I said, sure, Paul. Of course I'll visit you. I said, but Paul, you love California. Like, I took you to DC for like 2 days and you said it sucked. Like, well, and I'm not going to disagree there, but I was like, Paul, why would you leave California? And he said, because Mom, I want to have a house. That's what those conversations are happening. And not just with kids who are 14, with kids who are 40. And have still not been able to find the ability to build a house. So we have a huge workforce housing problem here in California. We cannot grow our population and grow our workforce and grow our economy if we do not invest in in housing and bringing down the affordability price point.
Okay, so now dealing with the folks who unfortunately are unhoused altogether, what factors do you see other than the economic factors that drive homelessness? And what have you done and what would you do to address that? And then with respect to those who are already on the street, what have you done and what would you do to address their plight?
Yep. So first I will say that I think the economic factors are the major driver of homelessness. I know that we want to talk about other things, and there are other things, but I think fundamentally it is the lack of being housed that often begets some of the other problems relating to whether it's substance use or mental health, other challenges that people face. So I think you cannot fully separate those things. And I would push back on the idea that the real reason we have a homelessness problem is because we have a fill in the blank other problem. I would say the reason we have a homelessness problem is because we have a housing problem. That said, there's no doubt that mental health is the only area in which healthcare has moved backwards in the last 40 years. We have made innovations and bigger investments in every kind of treatment, vaccine, cure, medication. On mental health, we have moved backwards in terms of what we have done. Today, you can get 3 days in an ER if you're lucky. The treatment that Senator Fetterman got, 45 days to fully recover from depression and emerge ready to go and vibrant and ready to tackle your work, that is not treatment available to virtually any other American. One of the things I've done is push to fully enforce the Affordable Care Act's provision on mental health parity. This is an oversight issue. When we passed the Affordable Care Act, I wasn't there. When Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, they promised that mental health would be treated like physical health. That has never, ever been true. People shop in their insurance to try to see what's the copay for a psychiatrist. It doesn't matter because there are none in network who are accepting new patients.
Where the Thelma Terrace
Year. So we have to make the insurance companies up the reimbursement rate for mental health, and we have to invest more in mental health as a component of public health, which means investing more in mental health specialists in our school. We did that in the pandemic. They worked, and we should double down on that rather than withdrawing that pandemic funding. I have a bill called the Mental Health Justice Act. What it would do is when someone's experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, it would deploy mental health or substance use responders rather than the police. And so connecting people more immediately to care rather than to the incarceration system is incredibly important. But I would say the last thing I'll say is have more data. My very, very first hearing in Congress is one you've never heard of. There was no whiteboard. There was no reporting about it. But the hearing was about homelessness. Maxine Waters, Financial Services, her very first hearing, we won back the House, was on homelessness, which I think is a great credit to her. We had 4 experts on homelessness. And I asked, what does the research tell us on how to site and size permanent supportive housing and transitional housing? How big should it be? Should it be near housing? Should it be near transit? Should it be near jobs? What do we need to do to make it successful? None of them knew. There is virtually no research. We are leaving local communities. They're trying their best. They're really throwing every kind of possible pilot and housing project up against the wall, but we're not studying what works. What kinds of housing projects, what kinds of transitional housing actually make a difference? What we've done in Orange County is we did a study on who our homeless were. It was a partnership between the United Way and UC Irvine. One of the most important things we found is that 60% of the people experiencing homelessness in Orange County have lived in Orange County more than 20 years. These are our neighbors. These are our friends. They are not coming from somewhere else. They are people who have been part and parcel of our community for decades. They are simply being priced out of having housing security. And what they did with that is after they knew what they had, they began to tackle each segment of homelessness differently. So foster kids who are aging out of foster care, there is an intervention you can make, and our Orange County United Way has done it. They have virtually eliminated foster kid homelessness in Orange County. It's a different intervention for veterans. It's a different intervention for people who are working 2 jobs, but still not able to afford housing and living in their cars. So I think we have to caution against thinking about the people experiencing street homelessness and mental health issues or substance use issues. They are the most visible, they are the most painful sign for many of us of homelessness, but they are really, truly, sadly, the tip of what I think is a larger iceberg of people experiencing housing insecurity. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Um,
I'm trying to stay in the
yeah.
picture here.
My question's about
Yeah, come up. So you can be
reparations.
in the picture too.
Okay,
There you
hi.
go.
The California Reparations Commission has documented once again the history of discrimination against Black Americans and the ongoing socioeconomic impacts. Black women and our very youngest children are impacted by racism and lack of resources. What policy efforts and actionable steps can be implemented to improve maternal health, and early childhood outreach for people of color.
Yep. So this is a very, very important project that we're undertaking to begin to understand what are the ongoing and continued legacy harms of this country's history of slavery and of racism. I think we cannot look away at this. We have to look more squarely at it. And I think the reparation studies are really important steps. I'm a co-sponsor and have been on Sheila Jackson Lee's bill to undertake a similar study at the federal level. The reality with Black maternal mortality is that this is a problem that has long been, it's long been in existence in the United States. And we simply now are beginning to see it, I think, and recognize it in a more visible way. There's a little bit of that element of progress there in seeing it. So look, we need to make more maternal care needs to be more available to everybody. We need to have more paid leave, to be honest. That's one of the biggest determinants of how you fare is whether or not you have paid leave afterwards. It's not just delivering the baby, it's how you do afterwards. And paid leave is disproportionately not available to hourly workers. And those are the very folks who need it and who are disproportionately brown and Black in this country. So I would say making investments in training doctors. I have a bill on culturally competent care. We know that when Black women express that they are in pain or they feel that they're in danger, that they are simply ignored. And this leads to higher rates. And we have to begin to close the gap on trust with the medical profession. We have to look honestly at things like the syphilis studies and understand why Black and brown Americans don't always feel comfortable coming into the doctor. And when they express their pain and their needs, they're often ignored. So I think we have to put more emphasis on this. We control the federal government controls the medical education training system. So it is we fund all of the medical education graduate school training spots in this country for interns and residents. So we have the ability to absolutely make investments in trying to document those care gaps and those outcome gaps and then to close them. I'm a huge advocate on childcare. I'm a single mother of 3 very lightly supervised children. Luke, Paul, and Betsy are 17, 14, and 11. I am the only single mother of school-age children in the United States Congress. I think there's probably a reason, because it's very, very hard. And when people ask me about it being hard, I say to them, how hard it is for me. Think about how hard it is for the worker at the gas station, the person who's cleaning the airplane who has to get to LAX at 3 a.m, right? So I think we simply need to treat childcare as what it is, an investment in our future workforce. It's an investment in our economy. It's not a nice extra that we give to women or that we give to kids. It is a necessity building block of our society, and our global competitors are all investing more in early childhood education and childcare than we are. And we are literally being left behind as an economy because of our refusal to understand childcare as that building block of economic success.
Ready? Go ahead.
So I think you touched on this a little bit.
Can you be a little bit louder
Oh,
so
of
they can
course.
hear you? Yeah.
I think you touched on this a little bit, but for immigration, especially on the southern border, what do you think, and what will you do as a senator, and how do your ideas differ from the Biden administration?
So look, one of the pieces of advice that you're given as someone running in a competitive seat is immigration is divisive. Don't talk about it. Wrong. Absolutely dead wrong. If you're not responding to the issues that are on people's minds and you don't know, you're not showing them that you know what they're worried about, you will never win their vote, much less win the entire election. So I talk about immigration all of the time. I think there's an oversight element to this, which is about keeping our promises. We promised Dreamers, for example, that we would deliver citizenship for them, and we have failed to keep that promise. That erodes trust in government, not just among immigrant families, not just among Dreamers, but among all Americans. The reality is that immigration has been a social and economic positive throughout America's history, and we shouldn't back away from explaining that to people. One of the most common things I hear in Orange County is people say, people should wait in line. Right? I waited in line. People should wait in line. And I hear this most frequently, by the way, from other immigrants who often have immigrated on work visas, through family migration, through other systems. I went to the border. I've been 3 times since I've been in office 5 years, and I've been 3 times. I went to the Tijuana side of the border. I've been to private detention facilities. I've met with ICE agents. I've met with social workers. I've toured shelters for trans refugees in Tijuana. I have stood on the Tijuana side of that border and approached border agents and said, hi, I have a credible fear of persecution. I'm seeking asylum. I have all my documentation. Where do I go? US citizens and green card holders only. I said, I understand this line is for US citizens and green card holders only, but I'm seeking asylum under international law, under title, whatever. Where do I go? There is no line under Title 42. That is the failure of Trump that Biden has continued for too long, which is you cannot have an orderly, lawful immigration system if you have no system at all. And that is what we're dealing at our border. So the chaos that we see is a direct response to the fact that our own immigration system is chaotic. We don't actually have a lawful, orderly system. There's no line to get in. So I think we have to create one, and it's going to require making tough choices. And the reality is that Republicans, this hope of bipartisan immigration reform, that is not going to happen. I'm just going to tell it like it is. Democrats are going to have to lean in, grow up, be brave, and deliver the immigration system that America needs. I would love to get Republicans engaged in this project, but I am not going to continue to leave people struggling and families in trouble, people without documentation here in the United States, out of our economy and out of our society, waiting for Republicans to grow up and have courage. Democrats have to lean in and lead on this issue, and we have to be willing to talk about what it means for our country and our society to continue to pretend that immigrants are not here, are not part of our communities, and are not a valuable part of our economy and society.
Okay, so this is a political question. So unlike your two Democratic colleagues running in the race, you're giving up a crucial swing seat to run for Senate.
Yep.
And whether you win or lose the Senate race, there is a real risk that the 47th district could flip back to
Oh,
Republican
nonsense.
control.
I'm so glad you're asking about this. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, so just wanted to reiterate, because our club did a lot of work
Yep.
in 2018 to elect you. I see a lot of people in this room who joined me on buses to
Yep.
go down and get you into office. So the basic question is, what if you when you were considering your run,
Mhm.
you know, what kind of consideration did you give to and would it be a good trade-off for Californians if it were to happen that you won the Senate seat, but then we lost that seat to a Republican?
Okay, great question. Let's talk about this. This is like the kind of sometimes the elephant in the room that nobody wants to ask about. So thank you for just straight up asking me. Several things here. First off, California, this role, this senatorial role is a policy role, but it is also equally powerfully a political role. We have a new era coming in our politics. Speaker Pelosi is now Speaker Emerita, right? Senator Feinstein is retiring. Gavin's in like Alabama or wherever he's been. We need political leadership in this state. I want a durable Democratic majority in the House, in the Senate, and in every level of government. To get there, we have to know how to win in tough races. And our senator can be someone who messages in a way that helps people win. Our senator can be someone who can go on the ground and go to those rallies and go to those events and talk to swing voters. Or our senator can be somebody who says things without a thought to how a Republican or an independent or an infrequent voter might hear it. That makes it harder. Trust me, I've been that person. And I know what it's like to have messaging coming from the top of the party that is not connected to the tough races that we have to win. Makes it harder. And it means we have to knock twice as many doors, and we have to send 3 times as many texts, and we have to spend. So I think the political part of this is we need to win 3 to 5 seats in California and hold them. And to do that, we need a political leader who loves to campaign, who knows how to do it, and who activates the voters that we most need. We are not going to win 3 to 5 seats by winning more Democrats. We are going to win 3 to 5 seats by activating independent voters, Latino voters, API voters, and younger voters. That's how I've won in Orange County. That's how I'm going to win the Senate race. And in doing that, I'm going to help turn out those folks in everybody's races across California. At the federal level, yes, in the Central Valley, in the coast, in far northern California, in Orange County, we need stronger messaging, and we need stronger messaging on the economy. I ran in 2018. Many of you did call and knocked, and you remember that the big theme of 2018 was, to be brief, Trump sucked. That was basically the theory of the election. Remember that? I am here to tell you that message has the great virtue of being true. And I commend my colleague Adam Schiff for saying it and saying it often. But I'm here to tell you, we have peeled off every last voter we can on that message. That message has been heard. and the people that we could persuade, the doors, when that's the message you're giving, we have gotten all of those people, and you know where we are? Just a little short. So we need to have a message that's going to help us with those independent voters, with the Latino voters, with the younger voters, the API voters. That's our path to building a durable Democratic majority. And that's what I'm good at. That's what I'm good at doing. I'm good at talking about inflation. The Democrats actually told us in swing seats, this was their advice. Don't talk about inflation. People don't like it. Like, if I don't mention inflation, you won't notice that you can't afford to fill your gas tank. You're gonna notice, right? And we have to have a positive affirmative message about it. So I think that what we need in California is, yes, my district, and I'm gonna talk about that in a second, but it's my district. Look, we spent 28 million, my campaign spent $28 million delivering the 47th congressional district with all of your help this cycle. And you know where we are? In the minority. So we have to be able to build that durable Democratic majority. And to do that, the Democratic Party needs stronger messaging. And by the way, to keep the Senate, we have to have California senators should be able to be an asset to John Tester, should be an asset to Sherrod Brown, should be able to go help Jackie Rosen. Yes, round up the checks in California. I understand that's an important part of how we think about the political work in California. I was the highest Democratic fundraiser in the House last cycle. I will do that work. But you can also put me in Cleveland to talk to Black families about predatory lending and what that does to strip away their wealth, and why Sherrod has been a warrior in fighting it. You can send me to Montana, to the county fair. I was a 9-year 4-H'er. Like I'm there to talk about why, when we leave behind rural America, we leave behind critical parts of our economy and our national security. Like, we need that help, and we need that kind of flexibility. All right, on the 47th district particularly, this is a Biden plus 11 seat. There are 33 seats in the House currently held by Democrats that we have to defend that were closer than that. That's depressing now, isn't it? So if you think the 47th district is our big swing fulcrum seat that's going to decide how many seats Democrats have and how many seats Republicans have, you're cruising for a 40-seat loss. I have zero intention of doing that. So if we can't win a Biden plus 11 seat with Biden on the ballot in a presidential year, with a seat in a county where Democrats now outnumber Republicans, God help us, right? Because we are really in trouble. So I will do the work. I will be there. I will give my volunteer list. I will get, sorry, I'm going to give them all your names. I will give my volunteer list. I will give my voter ID file. These are things that I didn't have last cycle. I got the list of voters in February, and the election was in October. That is really hard. It was a midterm year. It is a Republican district. It is avowedly not a Trump district, and it is not going to be a DeSantis district either. So we have to do the work. You will, I hate to tell you all, but we will all be knocking in Huntington together again, and not Park Beach, that Huntington. Okay, we're all going to have to do it again. But the fundamental project is we need to tackle building this durable majority across the country and across California. And I think I have an unusual skill set to be able to do that, and to do it in a way that is consistent with and reinforces our progressive values. I was both the #2 in the Progressive Caucus and a frontliner in one of the most competitive seats. That is not an oxymoron. I am not a unicorn. There were actually 6 of us who were members. 1/4 of the tough seats that we were trying to defend were held by members of the Progressive Caucus. So you can be a progressive, lean into your California values, and win in every part and pocket of California, but you have to have a strong message, and you have to have that political organizing work being done. And so I'm really committed to doing it. So I think it's actually the opposite of what people think. I think you should vote for me if you are worried about losing my seat, the 47th congressional district, because I will make sure that we don't just lose the 47th. I will make sure we get back the 45th, and that we elect Will Rollins, that we make sure that we're able to win some of those seats in Central California, right? Goodbye, Adam Graham. Goodbye, John Doherty. Goodbye, Mike Garcia. Like, that's the work that we need to do. And the country is counting on us in California to do that political work. So I would tell you to, yes, you're choosing a policy leader, but the biggest differences in this race aren't about policy. The biggest differences in this race are about politics. And that is, I think, my advantage in this race, rather than being, I think, a risk.
Representative Porter, my name's Natalia. I'm the recording secretary for the club, and I get to ask you the super fun question of what are your views on the response to date by the United States to the Russian invasion of Ukraine? And what, if anything, do you think the United States should do differently in the future in response to that invasion?
Yep. So I think it's really important that the United States stand up for human rights, stand against Russia's aggression, and be a good ally and build diplomatic ties with our allies to stand with Ukraine. I think this is absolutely the right thing to do. But to be clear, we could not do it alone. The things that we're doing that are effective in Ukraine are effective because we're doing them in concert with our allies. So I think we have to continue to invest in building those diplomatic relationships. Sanctions don't work when one country imposes them. They work when the entire global community comes together. And to do that, to build those kinds of coalitions, you have to invest in diplomacy. And we had a lot of trust to rebuild after President Trump. And so I feel very fortunate that we were able to repair some of those ally relationships and be able to address that collectively. I also think that we need to understand that while we are there for the Ukraine, we are going to continue to invest in keeping them safe and allowing them to push back against Russian aggression. That there are forces that view this as an opportunity to simply boost their bottom line of defense of the military defense industry. And so I think we have to look at every dollar in the defense budget, just like we're asked to look at every dollar in the non-defense budget and ask ourselves, is this something that makes the world safer? Is this an investment in a better future? Or is this about lining the pockets of corporate America? So I've been really supportive of what we've done so far in Ukraine. I think it's really important. I think there are lessons here about the value of having those allyships though, and not going at it alone. And I think it is a very big difference with what we're seeing in Ukraine than some of what we saw in some of the other countries where we have stood up similarly to aggression. I also think there are hard lessons for us in Afghanistan about what we're going to do with Ukraine and how we're going to think about maintaining that. Putin, Russia, they're not going away. They're going to continue to be threats. And so I think we have to think about how to invest in building Ukraine's democracy. It's not that kleptocracy is a problem only in Russia. It's also a huge problem in Ukraine. And we were doing really good work to address that problem in Ukraine, which is part of the reason that they are now able to mobilize and function as a government to fight back. So I would say continuing to invest not only in the diplomatic stuff and the military stuff, but also in the nation state building on the front end rather than trying to clean it all up on the back end after there's been a problem.
Great. So you spoke earlier about your no vote on the debt ceiling.
Mhm.
So you explained why you voted no already, but I wanted to know if you were at all concerned about the economic potential of default, if enough of your other colleagues had joined you and voted the same way. And then as a follow-up to that, what do you believe can and should be done to prevent this kind of gamesmanship from Republicans about the debt ceiling, the budget, all these things? Like every few months we have this big standoff and they negotiate these sometimes not so great deals.
Yep. So look, the debt ceiling doesn't work. Let me explain it to you like this. This is what the debt ceiling is. I say to myself, this year at Christmas, I only want to spend $300 on Christmas gifts. That's my budget. That's my debt ceiling. And then I go in the store and this is so cute. And my mom would love that. And my daughter she actually needs new tennis shoes. I put it all in the cart. I look away when I pay for it. And then a few months later, the credit card bill comes and it's $500. And I said that my debt ceiling was $300. What happens if I don't pay for the stuff that I bought? I default. And that has all of the terrible consequences in people's lives that it would have in the federal governments. So I think first we didn't message well on this at the outset to help the American people understand that this is first and foremost about paying our bills, something that Americans understand, because we jumped into what they're going to cut and what we're not going to cut instead of just getting the political will that we needed across the political spectrum that we should pay our bills. On the debt ceiling, look, there were two really untenable things put against each other. One is the prospect of default, and the other is the prospect of moving backwards, particularly for California on climate. It never should have gotten to that point. So I think we should repeal the debt ceiling. I think this is another example of kind of institutional status quo Washington continuing year after year to double down on a policy that does no good It does not curb our spending any more than I stopped putting things in the cart that were cute because I hoped that I would spend less at Christmas. This is like a bad diet. It's like a diet when you're getting fat. On the diet, you would stop, right? This is what we're doing with regard to the debt ceiling. So I think we should just get rid of it. And I think we should have gotten rid of it back when we were in charge of the House. And I think passing that then would have helped build the political will when we got into this negotiation. The other thing is we always, as Democrats, vote for that clean debt ceiling. When the shoe's on the other foot, we have to put our planet and Americans at risk in order to get the Republicans to vote for it. So if I were President Biden, I would have invoked the 14th Amendment long ago. It would have drawn a court challenge. It would have taken time, but I think we should have gone there. And I think Congress should have acted at the same time. We should have put a bill on the floor to remove the debt ceiling and force Republicans to vote against it. Because next time it's going to be the same thing.
Great. So we just want to give you the opportunity to make any closing remarks before we wrap up.
I want to thank you all very much for being here, for giving me the chance to talk with you, and to thank you for being engaged in this. I know, because I hear it every day, that this Senate race is causing a lot of you to have heartburn. What do? We have so many candidates. They're terrific. We're so lucky, but you don't look like you feel lucky. You look kind of worked up about it. This is an amazing opportunity. As I said, having a vibrant, competitive Senate race is going to be how we are going to win down ballot this cycle. This is the top of the ticket. If we have a competitive, spirited Senate race that engages not just Democrats, but independents and winnable Republicans, then we will drive turnout all over this state. And that was how we're going to help win every race that we need to win. So I know that people are worried what will happen if someone wins and loses. Barbara and I are all grown-ups. We all get it. Like, we're excited to be part of this race. We're excited to be engaging people in a conversation about California's future. And I really think that's what this race is about. It is about what are the problems we need to solve? What is the political work we need to do? What are the policies that we need worked on? And for me, this is about shaking up Washington. I did not go to Washington to follow the rules. I went to Washington to rewrite them. And I think when we look at the Senate, that is doubly true of the House, that it is time to rewrite the rules of the Senate and deliver an institution that's functional in a way that it frankly has failed to be for the last decade. That's why I'm running. That's why I'd love to have your support. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being so engaged. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Porter, for being here. And for those we haven't had a chance to mention at the top of the meeting, but we were supposed to have Congresswoman Lee here on Wednesday. Unfortunately, Wednesday was the date of the vote of the debt ceiling, so she had to reschedule, and we're working with her team to bring her back. We will absolutely be letting everybody know when that's coming within the next couple of months at the latest. So we have a couple more bits of business for this meeting. First of all, we want to we have one piece of legislation we want to endorse. So I want to bring up our VP of legislation, Isabel Story. I'll give her a pause.
Thank you. Just what I love, following Katie Porter. So I will keep it somewhat brief. This is a very important bill. So as you know, I'm the head of the legislative committee. We vet various bills. There are about like 2,500 that are introduced in the state each year. And we pick some of the top ones in each area to get the endorsement and then to advocate for these bills with our state legislators. So this is a very important environmental bill that I'm asking you to consider tonight, SB 252. And what this would do is require CalPERS and CalSTRS to divest from fossil fuels. So CalPERS and CalSTRS are the two largest pension funds in California, investing billions of dollars. And I actually looked, and their fossil fuel investments are only about 1 to 1.5% of their total investments. So, you know, this is not projected to at all harm them, but it could be really important to the environment. Right now, we're in a worldwide movement to divest from fossil fuels, and I think it's time for California to be part of that. So I'm asking you to vote. And John, how are we doing the vote? To vote yes. And the yes, I can also tell you that our legislative committee voted unanimously to recommend this bill. And our executive board also voted unanimously. So the final step is the vote of the membership, which is what we're doing now.
Okay, so now we will, this is gonna be our first hybrid vote ever.
Okay,
So we want to see, first of all, if there's a motion to endorse this bill. I saw Sam go first and.
So
Jen,
moved.
Want to second the motion? Okay, great.
Thank
So we
you.
have the motion. And now we'll take a show of hands vote if everyone's okay with that. So everyone who's interested in voting yes, please raise your hand and raise your virtual hand online.
are we counting these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
You have 5 online
12, 13. I count 13, 1. Oh, wait,
plus me.
14. Oh,
plus me.
15. Oh, plus me, 16.
Okay, so we have 21 yes votes. Let's everybody lower your virtual hand. Hopefully it won't take as long to lower your in-person hand as it does online. Okay,
So-
and one more. Going down, okay, and anybody who wants to vote no? And any abstentions? Okay, it passes.
All right, there was one abstention.
Oh, there's
for the
one
record.
abstention,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, thank you, everybody. So from here on that we've endorsed this, we'll write a support letter to whoever committee this goes to next, and we'll continue following it through the whole legislative session till hopefully it passes. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Isabel. And thank you to the legislative committee. And next up, we have a vote on our grievance committee, and Mike Soloff will explain what that means.
Thank you. So as we're required to do and we want to do, we have a grievance committee as part of the bylaws. If you want to read about it, just go to the website and click there. And that's in case there's either a violation of the bylaws or our anti-harassment policies or our anti-discrimination pledge. People can do that. Hopefully it's something we won't need, but it's something that we need to have in place in case it ever does become a need. So by our bylaws, we have to have 5 members, 2 alternates, and then 2 restorative justice officers. Their job is to try and see if restorative justice can be an alternative at the beginning of the process to a formal adjudication. We require that there be at least 3 people who self-identify as female on the grievance committee and 2 people who don't self-identify as female. One of the alternates self-identifies as female, one who doesn't self-identify as female, and the same with our restorative justice officers. We also require that there be at least, I believe it's 1 person of color on there. We have a very diverse group of people who have volunteered to do that, many with legal training and other backgrounds. And so today we're asking for your vote to make those people formally appointed to the grievance committee for the next year. The executive board unanimously supports this slate of folks. And it was in your
Back up, yeah.
it was in your email, and so that I don't do it from memory. Thank you. So the proposed grievance committee will consist of Jesse Kohler, Darlene Evans, Jan Goodman, Joel Corey, Dennis Aoki, and then 1 alternate will be Reverend Janet McKiffin, and the other alternate will be Steve Duran. And then the proposed restorative justice officers would be Rana Kirkland and myself. So is there a motion to adopt that slate of folks? So I think Sam got up first and you can second it, Sue. So if everybody will do it again, our virtual and in-place vote, everybody who supports that, if you could raise your hand. 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 16. Okay, and how do we count on here? Oh, no, 17. Okay, 17 in the room.
5.
Okay, so that's 22. Okay, anybody who's opposed? Okay, anybody wants to abstain?
Okay.
Great, thank you. I'll let everybody know they've been appointed.
Okay, one more announcement or piece to discuss before we wrap up here. Unfortunately, one of our board members is stepping down from the board, so I wanted to recognize Rana Kirkland. She's not here with us in person, but she is here on Zoom. Rana, are you still there?
Yes, hi,
there
John.
she is,
Hi,
yeah.
Patricia and everybody.
So Rana got a great professional opportunity to be the CEO of the company where she works. And we wanted to just, without getting too deep into the details of her professional career, we just wanted to recognize her really excellent work here. She came onto our board at a time that this club was really looking to not just have a more diverse board, but to work on the issues of diversity and inclusion in the club. And Rana really took that initiative for this club and spearheaded it in a way that none of us could have possibly seen or envisioned that it would be creating, not necessarily founding, but creating this really impressive and dynamic diversity and inclusion committee where we've had so many interesting guests from around Santa Monica, around LA County, around the whole country. We've had guests come to speak with different diverse backgrounds to share their personal stories. Some of those guests have been people who don't always line up with the political background of this club. And some of them have been people who haven't spoken to the main membership of the club, but have still since become really great allies of this club. And we've had the opportunity to hear from so many excellent, amazing guests, and she really leaves behind a great legacy for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, not only on that committee, but as I said at the beginning, the work that she did on our executive board and in the main membership of this club to foster a space that's welcoming for diverse peoples and inclusive of people who have often felt shut out from meeting spaces like these. So I wanted to, as the president, congratulate and thank Rana Kirkland for her work at the club, and we're really grateful.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to this club, which the board decided to, create the Diversity and Inclusion Committee after the murder of George Floyd, and it flourished into something, like John said, that, was enlightening and insightful in more ways than we could have ever imagined. For all of the board members and those who began the committee so that I could get started. Thank you to people like Patricia and Dolly, who have been my soul sisters along the way, and my co-chairs, Dan and Keith, and obviously John, and so many of you who have been so supportive. I say at almost every meeting that hate doesn't discriminate. And the D&I committees really taught us all to always come from a place of love. And we learned a lot and we grew a lot as human beings and as Democrats. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana, and not to worry, because the Diversity and Inclusion Committee is in great hands. We have our treasurer, Keith Coleman, who's going to continue that excellent work at the committee.
Yes, yeah, that's who I would recommend. Thank you.
So we're glad for that. Everybody, our next meeting of the club that's confirmed on the books is July 19th. We're going to have two guests, a double header meeting. We're going to be joined by our county supervisor, Lindsay Horvath, and also our assembly member, Rick Zburr, will be coming back. But again, stay tuned because we're going to have an announcement about when Barbara Lee is going to be returning. And until then, we're going to adjourn tonight. Of course, as some people may have guessed, in recognition of the great Tina Turner.
I call you, I need you, my heart's on fire. You come to me wild and wild. You come to me, give me everything I need. Give me a lifetime of promises and a world of dreams. Speak the language of love like you know what it means. And it can't be wrong. Take my heart and make it strong. You're simply the best. Better than all the rest. Better than anyone. Anyone I ever met. I'm stuck on your heart. I hang on every word you say. Tear us apart. Baby, I would rather be dead. In your heart, see the start of every night and every day. In your eyes, I get lost, I get washed away. Just as long as I'm here in your arms, I could be in no better place. You're simply the best. Better than all the rest. Better than anyone. Anyone I ever met. Ooh, I'm stuck on your heart. I hang on every word you say. Oh, tear us apart. No, no, no. Baby, I would rather be dead. Each time you leave me, I start losing control. You're walking away with my heart and my soul. I can feel you even when I'm alone. Oh, baby, now let go.
Bye, everybody.